In today's video, I'm going to show you how to use the frog stretch to improve your hip flexibility. I will be sharing beginner exercises all the way up to advanced exercises to improve your hip flexibility and mobility. Before we go any further, please make sure that you have subscribed to the channel, you have notifications turned on so you can know when my next video is coming out. You give a thumbs up and you comment below. I really appreciate it. And as a thank you, if you click the link below, you'll be able to get 52 weeks of free metabolic workouts delivered right to your mailbox. So let's dive into it. The frog pose is a great position to improve your overall hip flexibility, but it can be hard to get into this position. So what we're gonna do is first start off flat on our back. In general, you wanna make sure that you're warming up your hips before you just dive into any sort of stretching. So we can have our legs straight, we can come up, and then we can drop down and come around. Now, keeping your legs straight actually is pretty challenging because your lever becomes longer. So if we have any popping or clicking going on, what I want you to do, make sure your lower back is pushed into the ground, have a slight bend in your knee, and you can accomplish the same thing. If that's still too much, drop that foot to the ground, straighten them up, and you can go in the opposite direction as well. So you can do the same thing, come down, out, trace around. Like 5 to 10 in each direction, and then switch sides is a great place to begin. I'm going to get a nice stretch across your piriformis. So a great way to get into this is just bring one leg up, the other leg up, and just cross over. And all you're gonna do is shift your weight to one side. This might be a big stretch for you. It might not be a stretch, we'll see how it feels. But just let yourself get in there. Breathe deep into your belly, let it out. And you're just gonna hold it for about 20 to 30 seconds and then you'll switch sides. So again, breathe deep, you'll feel a big stretch across your glute. And let it go. Final hip mobility movement you'll do in this position. You're gonna lay flat on your back and all you're gonna do is actively push out. So it's dynamic. We're not holding any static position here. We're just moving in and out. Now, if this feels really easy for you, you feel good in this position, what you can do is take one leg, bring it into yourself. Take the other leg, so your opposite leg, and bring it out to the side, nice and straight. This will feel like a big stretch. And from here, all you're gonna do is you're gonna turn in, turn out. This is actually like the same movement you were doing, but it's more advanced because we're actively trying to scoop that position. I would say anywhere from 10 to 15 of these. And then of course you'll switch sides, perform it on the other side. The big thing here is making sure that your lower back stays in contact with the ground the entire time. Look at this adductor stretch, but we're gonna make it dynamic. So you're gonna take your leg up and place it on either a box or a bench. Doesn't matter, it depends on what you have available to you. Some people will be like this, that's not gonna feel very good, so make sure that your foot is flexed. From here, we're gonna do two variations. Variation number one, you're just gonna rock back and forth. And this in of itself is gonna feel great across that groin. You're gonna feel it into your lower back perhaps, into those hamstrings. Depends on where you're tightest. Now this is a fantastic way to open up those hips a little bit more and feel that stretch. Option number two, once you're feeling comfortable with that, is to take this foot and as you rock back to turn it up towards the ceiling. This is more of the fancy term is uncupping of the hip, but it feels very good. It gets deep into there. So just a couple of those. Again, about 10 to 15 on each side. Next mobility drill, you're gonna stick with your bench here. Again, you would use something softer. I'm using a hardwood thing that my wife got at Home Goods. Place your hands to the inside and you're gonna place one foot up. If this is all you've got, great. Don't worry about it. This is a great place to be with your flexibility. But if you want to take it a step further, turn your foot out a little bit and you're going to actually just let your body weight come forward. Now this is a big stretch, right? And we can hold it statically if you want to really sink in there for a couple seconds. What I prefer to do though is to use your arms as support here, drive your back heel towards the wall that's behind you and keep that straight line. Now from here, you're gonna let yourself hinge forward. So you're gonna let that belly button tilt forward, drive your foot into the ground so you stand up tall. Forward, Drive that foot into the ground so you stand up tall. We're going to do about 10 of these on each side. When you get really comfortable with this, the goal is to get your chest to come down, your belly to come down. Ideally, I would have a little more space here, but this is what I've got. So again, beginner version of this, just get that foot down, right? And just work on those dynamic contractions. 5 to 10 on each side, and then on that side, just pause and hold. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Oh, big stretch. Oh my goodness. That is a big stretch. Whatever you have available to you, you're going to put one leg on. Ideally, you would have your entire leg on the box. This will be your stretched position. Now, for this, what you're going to do is I want you to drive your knee into the bench, and you'll feel automatically, you'll feel your glute click on a little bit more. Now, this is going to be kind of intense. What you're going to do is you're going to let your belly button tilt forward like we were just doing, and then you're going to drive that knee into the ground to come back up. So again, you're going to let that belly button tilt forward like you're pulling yourself into that stretch. Drive that drive that knee down into the surface, and you'll find that you'll be able to come back up. We're going to do 10 of these. Once you make it through 10, right, let's say I made it through 10, you'll then let that belly button tilt further forward, push that leg back so you get that nice deep stretch into the glute. Right? And you'll do 2 sets on each side. Would be supported, and again, I would just come forward, lean in, come out. Now you might be saying to yourself, why am I doing this elevated? It's actually easier for someone to do it elevated from on the ground. The number one limiting factor for someone with flexibility with the Pigeon is actually having external rotation. So by elevating it, you can even do it a little bit closer up. You'll be able to get into the position without having your knee hiked all the way up in the air. Right? It's just another variation. Active movement is really important. It's what we would call a dynamic contraction, and that's going to allow you to have more control and strength in end range, which is actually far more important than just passively holding. People might just try to jump right into frog. What I actually find, there are 2 variations of the frog that I think are more important to introduce before you do the frog. So what we're going to look at, number 1, is we're going to look at a tactical frog. The tactical frog is going to allow you to move through that hip capsule with some hip uncupping, fancy guru terms. Basically, we're just going to loosen up that space. So what you'll be in, let's say this is about as far as you can get into your frog, right? Well, the tactical frog literally is coming forward, allowing that heel to come up, returning back, and then alternating onto the other side. This is going to feel good. You don't want to rock so far back that you feel any sort of pulling or anything tight behind the knee. You'll be right about here, and you're just going to allow yourself to rock forward and come back. Ooh. Now, you might need to, I'm on a mat right now, so it doesn't bother my knees. You might need to have some rolled up towel or some matting, a yoga mat, something to provide relief, just because that is a sensitive area of the leg. Now, I would say doing 2 sets of this would be really, really a great place to be. The lower you get into it, the more you'll find that you can get a little bit deeper into that hip. It's important to stay active. It's not that I'm just throwing my leg up. It's that I am actively picking up my leg to come back. So that's level 1 of this tactical frog. Now, to do is as you come forward, allow one arm, the opposite arm of the leg, to come forward. This is going to require you to stabilize through your hips. And you're going to find when you do that, every time you take a deep breath, you get a little bit more into that hip. Deep breath. You feel it through that hip complex. Fancy way of saying all the things around the hip joint. Anywhere from 10 to 12 of these, more than enough. Second variation of the frog stretch that I think is great is the half frog. Half frog is a little bit easier if you don't have the hip mobility required to be this low. And again, it's going to allow us to use dynamic contractions, which are far more important. So from this half frog position, as you can see, I got one leg up about 90 degrees. You don't want to be up so high. That's not going to feel great. You want to be about medium position. Got that back leg extended, right, Lucy? Yeah, I know. And from here, you might already feel a stretch. Like this in and of itself could be a big stretch through that hip. The way we're going to get the most out of this is I want you to drive that knee into the ground. And then what I want you to do is pull your belly button towards your spine. So see, I'm not completely flat, I'm active here. You can even use your elbows to help you. I already feel a huge stretch all around the musculature of that hip. That's good because we're being active. Again, you might cramp up a little bit. Breathe deep into your belly. That's okay if you have some cramping. It just basically means everyone's at the door for the party and trying to get through it once. The body needs to relax and let one thing in at a time. One knee down, and all you're going to do is rock yourself forward slightly and then come back. It's a really small range of motion. You see, I'm not doing anything too crazy. So I'm going forward, I'm driving my knee down the whole time. You see how I have the back foot is flexed, and it's actually helping me move forward and back. It's a small range of motion. I'm active the whole time. After 10 of those, what we'll call dynamic contractions, you're going to pause, and what you're going to do is you are going to try to almost lift this leg up off the ground. And by doing that, it's like you're trying to slide out a little bit. And you'll find that the tighter you squeeze your butt, the more you let that slide out, the deeper you get into it. What we're doing here is we're staying active, we're controlling the end range, and this is really going to help us build control over that hip joint, because if we're going into that frog stretch, we really want to be able to control it versus just passively sitting in it. I'm all for passive stretching. I think it's great, but if we want to get the most out of it and have the biggest carryover into everyday life, into our workouts, then it's important that we are active in these stretches, building strength at that end range, okay? Saying to yourself, wow, this seems like a lot to get into a stretch. Well, if we're trying to get into a specific position, we have to consider that maybe, just maybe, we can accomplish the same thing with other mobility drills. The frog pose is great. It's one option that you can use. Maybe if you're doing yoga, you want to be in that position. Maybe if you're walking towards your middle splits, you want to have that position. That's great. But you have to consider everyone has a different body, and every body has a different stretch that works best for them. So instead of trying to spend your time cramming into a position that just does not feel good for you, why not pick any one of these mobility drills that I'm showing you and just trying those instead for a bit and then coming back to the frog pose. Now we're going to take a look at the actual frog stretch. To get into this position, you're going to have your knees a little bit wider than hip distance apart. And this might be all you have right now, right? I have my legs out. The big thing we want to focus on here is that we don't want to I'm showing my belly here. We don't want to just drop into this position and have a big arch through our lower back. That's actually going to move around the area that is tightest, which is our groin. So what you're going to do is pull your belly button towards your spine and keep that tucked position. Now, what I recommend is resting in this position for like up to 30 seconds, just relaxing as wide as you can possibly get. That is really key here, because if we can relax a little bit, we'll get deeper into the stretch. As we can see, let your knees slide out a little bit more. Now, the way we're actually going to handle this is using those dynamic contractions. We want to think about driving our knees into the ground, so I'm feeling active here. I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to try to squeeze my legs together as I rock back and forth. So squeeze, squeeze. You might feel some cramping along your glutes, along your inner thigh. It depends on where you're tightest. Again, we're going to do about 10 of these. And let's say this is 10. What we'll then do, we want to into that stretched position a little bit deeper. So what we'll do is think about trying to lift your knees off the ground and spread the floor apart. So spread the floor apart while trying to lift those knees off the ground, and you'll get a little bit deeper into the stretch. Now, the idea here is not to try to go from here all the way down. That's not really where we want to go. What we actually want to focus on is building strength in this position. So we want to keep that tucked position, nice flat back, and we're just going to, again, do another set. So you can do about 2 to 3 sets of this. That might be more than enough for you. Actually, 1 set might be more than enough for you, depending on your flexibility level. So once we get there, we're going to try to pick those knees up off the ground, keep sliding into that position. Sliding into that position. And eventually, maybe you will get to the point where You can touch your chest down, do things like that. That's kind of cool party trick, but really want to breathe deep into that belly, keep that tucked position. To get out of the stretch, it's very important that we don't just come out. What you want to do is squeeze the legs together, shift your weight forward, push yourself up. Now, we're not going to stop there. We want to use that range of motion. So you have two options here. I'm going to show you two different exercises. One is very beginner friendly. The other one is a little more advanced, but it's important. This is what we'll call the traveling butterfly. The traveling butterfly is exactly what it implies. The butterfly position is this, right? We can practice doing this. We can, again, make this dynamic, keep our chest up. Think about pulling those knees down by squeezing your glutes, right? This position in and of itself is fantastic. But what we want to do is a more dynamic version. So we'll have our legs out in front, whatever version of out in front straight we can have that's comfortable for you with your level of mobility. And then what you're going to do, you're going to pick your butt up and you're going to scoot it forward. So this is where I am right now, but if it means you get here, great, right? You just have to find where you are right now, but this is where I am today. Now, why is this important? Well, because we just spent all that time stretching the hip. We want to actually now use the hip, use that range of motion. And this is a nice beginner exercise that you can do, right? You can also go to like butterfly, like this, just something that actually allows us to actively move in and out of that range of motion. The 12 of these will be more than enough. Squeeze your feet together. Squeezing those feet together, keep this very active and allows you to build control over that range of motion. Use two furniture sliders. You can use knee pads if you have them. Furniture sliders tend to work best. And what you're going to need is a surface that they can move on. So carpeting, again, that's a great option. On my mat, there's a little too much resistance. So that's why we're going to use this. It's probably going to be loud, but I don't really care. You'll get the idea of it. For our dynamic contractions that we've been doing, in the traveling butterfly, you saw that we were driving our feet together, which turns everything on through our inner thigh, which is what we're really working on anyway. The ability to control our hips separating, which is what we're doing in the frog. What we're going to do, there's a term for this that you might see used in FRC, functional range conditioning, which is eccentric neural grooving, or eccentrics. So eccentrics are slow, controlled movements, building strength over a full range of motion. In a pull-up, the eccentric portion is when you slowly lower and control yourself as you come down. In a push-up, it's as you lower down. It's basically where you can take the most amount of weight to build strength over a large range of motion. So what we're going to do is two versions of this eccentric neural grooving. Number one is we're going to start in this, I'll move back a little bit. This is good. We're going to start in this position with our hands on the ground. And all you're going to do is you're going to drive apart and slowly control yourself as you go down into the bottom position, come back up, pull your legs together. So one more time. I'm actually sliding from this start position, getting myself down into the frog, pushing myself back up. Slide, slow and controlled, getting deeper into that position. Two would just be doing active, repetitive movements of this. So instead of having it be so slow and controlled, we're actually strengthening the full range of motion, treating it like a regular set of repetitions. So I have my hands on the ground. I'm going to allow myself to come out, come up. And this in and of itself is how we're going to build strength over a huge range of motion. And it's really going to help us to strengthen that hip complex, strengthen that position. We can actually have like a couple of other exercises that we can sneak in here for some fun if we want to use a furniture slider. What we can work on is another eccentric neural grooving. We'll be going from this start position nice and tall. We want to tuck our hips, squeeze there, and we're going to allow this to shift out, and we can bring ourselves back in. This is just another way to recruit all that musculature that you've been working on this entire time, all through that hip. Open, pull yourself back up. Again, go as slow as possible with as much control Now, you can go either way. You can flex the foot up, which is actually not the same as being turned in. Turned in is going to be more of that middle split position. But either one is actually going to give us some nice control over that full range of motion. So I would take your time with this. To go. I said we'd be going from beginner to advanced. This is pretty advanced in my opinion. But again, you're just working that range of motion. And if I was to turn my foot in, I'm flexing the entire time, really working on building control over that full range of motion. I'm being active. My whole leg is flexed. Now, there's quite a few different exercises here. We're going to put it together into something that can be pretty fun for you. You want to use that range of motion that you've built, right? Use it or lose it now. So what I would suggest is take a movement that you enjoy doing. So you could take something like a goblet squat. I want to use that range of motion that I built. So I'll take it nice and slow and controlled, come down into the bottom of that squat. Think about lifting my chest up while I pull myself down deeper. And I'll actually be able to explore that range of motion I have, rock side to side, come back up. You could do a couple sets like that. You could do some Cossack squats, really working on getting deep into that range of motion, staying low, right? It depends on where your flexibility is right now, but staying low in general is going to use that range of motion you've just been working on. You could, probably my favorite would be sumo walks. So a sumo walk, literally, you get into your sumo stance position, stay nice and low, and all you do is walk. Staying low the entire time, actively having to pull yourself in that range of motion. This is one of my favorite ones. It's also very challenging at the end of a leg day or something, but this is a great way to actively use that range of motion you've been working on. Now, you might notice that I'm a little out of breath here. That's because mobility work is a workout in and of itself. It's not something that we just do half-assed. It's something that you can be sore from it. You can get strong there. And when you combine mobility work with using end range of motion or training at end range, think about a full range of motion ass to grass squat. You're going to then solidify all that strength work, right? So you could do something like a hip mobility session. You could do a 10 to 15 minute session in the evening before bed or something if you wanted to, when you do an upper body day in the morning, right? These are just examples. Or you could spend 10 to 15 minutes doing that hip mobility work and then just bang out your heavy lifts, like your squats. Or you could do something focused on shoulders and work on overhead pressing or specific body weight movements. It does not matter. The whole idea is that you are actually building that range of motion and then using it versus holding a passive stretch. Passive range of motion or just passive flexibility is great. Some people are just naturally flexible, but they also run the chance of getting injured more frequently because they can't control that range of motion. That's where mobility comes in, because building strength over that huge range of motion allows you to have more cushion in case those uh-ohs happen. You slip on your kid's toy on the floor. You go to reach back behind you to grab something. You have to suddenly catch yourself if you're falling. All of these things require more mobility versus just passive flexibility, right? So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Visualize a ballet dancer, if you will, how strong they are over a full range of motion. Now combine that with lifting weights and you have a strong, resilient body. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Try some of these movements out. See how it feels with your hips. And remember, you don't just have to work on one stretch. You can find an alternative that matches you exactly where you're at, and you'll make a ton of progress if you are consistent. It's better to stretch a little a lot than a lot a little. Just keep that in the back of your mind. And please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, you have notifications turned on. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions about mobility, just drop them below. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. And without further ado, I hope you can realize that you're one day away from getting back on track and one day away from realizing how fucking amazing you are.